What's up, everybody? Bernardo here, and today I'll just give a quick idea for your marketing, for your company, for your e-com. And I had this while I was dumb scrolling. So actually, good ideas can come from everywhere as long as you got a curious mind to develop it. So, talking briefly. Basically, I had this idea when I was watching a reel about Walter Isaacson's autobiography on Steve Jobs. And basically, the main idea of Steve Jobs' main idea, or the thing that I found most interesting, it was the reality distortion field. So basically, Steve Jobs is famous, extremely famous, for making the impossible, right? Back in the day, basically, this video is being recorded with an iPhone, something that if he didn't make the reality distortion field, which is basically him screaming at his employees until they fixed the fucking problem and created the product the way that he wanted. But the thing about the reality distortion that you can also apply to your company is it is the same concept, but for your marketing. So basically, marketing is association. It's a game of associations. What do you want to associate your company with? What do you want to associate your product with? And that's why when you see like perfumes ads, right, is the most subjective thing possible. Like, how can you explain a smell to someone, right? How can you explain a smell to someone that had never smelled that smell before? So, because they're really good marketers, and another one is here, what you do is you create associations in that case of status, of hot girls, right? Because usually if it's a perfume for men want bitches, right? So basically, status, women, and being successful, right? And that's why usually they go on, like, they choose one or both ways, right? They either are making an ad with an extremely hot girl and a guy is on a three-piece suit, he's going to a really fancy event, a dinner, whatever, and he's making out with the bitch, basically, right? So you can go this route, the fancy route, or when the perfume is a bit lighter, when the perfume is, I try to remember the word that people use, when it's lighter, right? When it's one that you can use in the like outdoors on hot climates, all that kind of stuff. They focus on the beach. Usually they tend to focus on the beach and focus on waves, the power of waves, blah blah blah. And there's a handsome guy with a fucking smoking hot bitch, right? And they're kind of, they're kind of making out, kind of not, that sexual tension. Basically, it's a game of association, and they're associating all of that, associating the status, the the status, the power, the resources, and the hot bitches, the access to hot bitches, to their perfume. So the mental process that the consumer does, and of course this isn't even a bit rational, it's 100% emotion. People, they buy with emotion and justify it with logic. So what matters is you make associations. Let's start using this word. It's basically you make associations, right? Between your product and what you want to sell. And sometimes it doesn't make any fucking sense for you to associate the things that you're associating, right? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why there's a hot bitch in a fucking perfume, man? If you reflect about it, of course, if you reflect about it, you get into this conclusion that I've just explained to you, right? Which is, if you use my perfume, hot bitches will want to make out with you. That's the that's the thing. That's the spin. That's the sell, right? That's the marketing, right? But sometimes it doesn't make sense. But it doesn't need to make. That's the whole game. That's the whole thing. As long as you're selling a specific outcome, and once you're playing in the world of emotions, emotions doesn't need to make sense. Emotions don't need to make sense. The only thing that matters is you making that association in order for you to reach your goal, which is people buying your stuff. But why will people buy your stuff? Because you're solving a problem to them, right? And there's a whole other debate that how can you sell something that is not necessary? Well, it just came up very heavy wind right here, and I thought for a second that the camera would just fall. Yeah, whatever. But how do you sell things that aren't rational, right? Because let's think about a rational example. I'm looking at a fridge right now. You need a fridge. Why you need a fridge? Because otherwise your food won't endure for like more than 3 days. Otherwise they will get rotten. You lose the food and you get poison food and you will get fucked, basically. So that's a rational buy. I need a fridge. I'll buy a fridge. Good. But when you're playing the emotional game, how can you make emotions out of a fridge, right? And you can translate that to your product specifically. Even more if you're selling something that it doesn't have a specific purpose, right? It doesn't have a, how can I say that, a reason behind it, right? I'll use the fridge example. The fridge is used to refrigerate stuff. But why do you buy clothes, specific clothes? Why do you pay $10,000 for a piece of clothing, right? Which rationally, if you look 100% on the rational side, it's like less than $10 for it to be made, right? So why do you buy it? And that comes brand. And what is brand? A construction of associations. So we come full circle, right? We basically come back full circle. I don't even know if you're looking at what I'm writing right now. We basically make associations in a full circle. Good. All right. So basically, branding is a bunch of associations. And sometimes those associations do not make sense. But it doesn't need to make sense, right? And here it comes the reality distortion view. Because sometimes Steve Jobs was known for being extremely unreasonable and irrational in that sense. He would just start screaming at employees like, do this shit, solve this problem, boom, 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 boom. I don't care, I just want the problem fixed, blah, 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 whatever. And sometimes, if you bring that for the marketing side, sometimes the associations, at first, they don't make any sense. But it doesn't matter, they don't need to make sense, right? So, this is an example that I thought previously, which is, there are many companies that they say that they're the number one, I don't know, like, number one donut maker in America, the number one clothing brand in, I don't know, Europe, whatever, but Europe, the whole continent, right? And sometimes they aren't the biggest, right? When you look at numbers, they aren't the most valuable one. But why are they making this claim? And why are they, quote unquote, allowed to make this claim? Because we're working on emotional side. And sometimes emotions do not need to make sense, as I've said previously. So, basically, you make those claims that you want to make for your company. you make associations, you make associations, and on the long run, with many iterations of the reality distortion field of you saying we're the best, 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 you end up growing a fucking lot, right? And you're almost like brainwashing yourself, your employees, and the outside market, your clients, your future clients, your future leads, that you're the best, right? And of course, you need to have a good product, or at least you need to have a product to sell that you make bold claims. But if your product is shit, you will just burn your whole branding in the long run. But if you just want to make a quick buck, doesn't matter, but we're not here for this. Basically, branding is a bunch of associations, right? Let's say that this thing right here is branding, and it's just a bunch of associations, right? And using the perfume analogy, you put a hot bitch, you associate your perfume with a hot bitch, you associate your perfume with money, you associate it with high status, right? Here's you after using you a complete dork. No, actually that's women shit. Let's make some man hair right here. Whatever, fuck it. Status, right? Another thing. Status. And why not love, right? Love it ends up coming to fucking hot bitches, right? Whatever. But marketing and branding is basically making a bunch of associations, and you decide which associations that people will make with your brand. Because if you not define specifically what you're doing with your brand, you are letting their own minds create that version of the company, their vision about you. So that can be a problem, that can be something great, but usually it's good for you as the founder. You need to define what kind of associations that they want to make, so you have a baseline of what you're thinking, right? So let's say that you're creating content for your company, right? Organic content for your brand, whatever. Boom, boom, boom. If you have this defined, what associations specifically you want to make on your brand, you have a guideline for the pieces of content, right? So just an example, let's say that we're doing a reel, an Instagram reels right now, and your company, you're selling basically a perfume, let's say, right? So what you gonna do? Let's say that you've already decided that you want to put a hot bitch in your content, right? So you will hire a hot girl to appear in your video. That's always good. Putting hot people in your videos, regardless of the thing that you're selling or your company. It's always good to have beautiful people. When you have beautiful people in your place, subconsciously people associate. So it's always good. Put some hot bitches in your video. Put some handsome guys if it fits your thing, if it fits the thing that you're selling, right? So basically, let's say that we're recording this reel, right? And it's a clothing brand, so we'll be talking about some style. So you, considering that you know your audience, right? So you're selling to men, so you will put a hot girl talking about 5 things that five cringe pieces of clothing that men use. And let's consider that you're selling for people from 25 to 35. So what you're gonna say, cargo shorts are ridiculous. Let's say that the combo of using jeans and that using jeans and those running shoes are fucking horrible, right? And the main idea is you listing those top 5 things of pieces of clothing that your ICP, your ideal customer profile, that your persona uses, right? So based on that, because she's a hot bitch, she is validated, quote unquote, right? Because she's hot. And if you're a man and you aren't gay, you're pursuing hot girls. So once she's talking about pieces of clothing that wouldn't attract her, you're instantly grabbing their attention, you know? And you know, of course, there are ways of you making better hooks for that piece of content. There are many ways of doing it. But basically, it's a whole game of associations and making a reality distortion field for yourself and for your company and for your branding and marketing. Because once you do it and you define it specifically, and based on that, because most of selling is emotional and they justify with logic later, you basically emotionally hijack them into buying your shit, and then they buy it. That's what matters. And then they justify it with logic. Usually they justify it, they specifically reach the point of justifying with logic once it's an impulse buy. And then later, no way I did this fucking purchase, why I bought this, blah, 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 blah. And then that's when they justify with logic, right? The logic is basically a closer right in their ear, giving a justification for them to not ask for a refund and cancel the order. Well, let's break it down here, right? Number one, define what are the associations that you want to make for your company specifically, based on the emotions of your persona. 2, make the associations, right? Make the associations. And 3, create content and ads, your website, posts, organic posts, right? Ads, a direct responsive, that's your thing. You make those kind of associations. So you make it purposeful, you make it intentful. Basically, you tell what they want to hear, and by telling what they want to hear, what they want to feel, they buy from you. That's it. They buy from you and not your competitors. Good thing. So make association. So define, make the associations, and sell more, right? That's basically marketing. That's basically propaganda, which is basically marketing for governments and ideas and ideals, right? Because business is war and marketing is propaganda. It is the same framework, right? You define the association that people want to feel. You make the associations by repeating and repeating the same idea until people make the association, right? And you do the CTA, which is buy my shit, right? So basically, let me put this thing right? And sometimes you don't know how to make this specifically for your company, and that's why I'm here for. And for this and many other things, I'll leave a link below for my Calendly. Book a call right there and let's talk. Let's see how we, the whole Learning Media team, we can help you to make your income grow, right? Sell more revenue coming in. 2, and how we can create some marketing and branding strategies for you to increase your AOV, increase your LTV, and make people buy and buy more and more times, right? They come back to you. So book a call below. The link will be right here in the description, first comment, and all the good stuff. And have a great one. Have a good night. I'm saying have a good night because I'm recording this at night. So whatever. Have a good night. Boom.